Welcome to Athlete Complete, where we host raw and open conversations about the details that impact performance from current and former professional athletes for parents, players, coaches, and fans. Welcome back to the podcast. We're here with Steve Hauschka. Steve, welcome to the podcast, dude.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for having me, Sean.
We have this, whether we want to or not, now we have this theme that kind of arose out of the first episode, which is to explain some of your nicknames. So, Hauschka, going back to like your youth playing days and up till now, I want us to walk us through your various nicknames that you've had over the years.
Oh, wow.
Good start.
So Stevie Deevy, that was a nickname back in like middle school. I don't know how I got that one. I was little Stevie growing up in my family. And then when I got to NC State, Tom O'Brien was the head coach, and he thought I was Polish, so he called me the Polish Rifle. So I took that one on for a couple of years. I wasn't actually Polish, but it stuck for a couple of years. And then in Seattle, after a couple of years, Coach Carroll started calling me House Money. So that one stuck. That was probably the best one of all of them. But yep, there's the outline.
Nice. House Money. I like it. I like it.
I'm pretty sure I have you in my phone is House Money with a $sign.
I think Polish Rifle's the best one out of all those. I think you got to bring that back.
Rifle. Yeah, there's a lot of context for that one.
Yeah,
That's like
a Polish Rifle. I never knew that. That's incredible. There were no, but you played soccer most of your youth career. There were no soccer nicknames that came into the fold, like anybody that you idolized and you called yourself.
Bow-legged kicker for a little while.
Right.
Bow-legged kicker.
Bow-legged kicker. Wait, that stemmed from soccer?
Yeah, I was always I used to
Definitely
get a
not
lot
that
of
was
jokes like I was riding on a horse or something all the time because I'd walk like this with my knees.
It's great for your hips, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're like a little kid. Every little kid looks like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Ben's older brother is pretty bow-legged, like really bow-legged.
Yeah, to the
Hockey
point where it
players,
makes
too.
him. Yeah, he's sub 6 feet. Like me and my other brother are both 6'1" or 6'2", and yeah, he's 5'10". So
Can't stand up straight, huh?
no. So he overcompensated with his really smart brain and got a PhD in chemistry and all that kind of stuff due to his short nature and stature.
Steve, speaking of smarts, and you just showed us your dad's tomato garden situation. Will you give us some background on kind of like how you were brought up in that household, I guess, being around your dad and what he did and how that's kind of formed maybe the way that your brain kind of thinks?
Yeah, well, I can speak to it pretty well, especially being here right now at the home that I grew up in. A lot of memories are coming back. I'm sleeping in the room that I slept in as a baby, so there's some interesting dreams. And the carpet's still the same, the wall is still the same. You know, my parents even pulled out some bags of stuff to go through, so all these childhood memories come rushing back in. So I was the youngest of three. My brother's Andy's 6 years older than me. My sister's Kath is 3 years older than me. And I just kind of ran around the house as a little guy, probably pretty fearless. I loved my dad was a big gardener, or he still is. And so I would just chase him around and was interested in that. And I think he kind of taught me how to kick a ball really young. I remember kicking a soccer ball around the yard at 3 years old. And I just had this natural ability, and I became obsessed with soccer, and like probably more than you, Brad or Drago. Like I was so obsessed with soccer. It was all I thought
real
about.
quick, one thing about Steve is when he gets into one thing, he is fully obsessed with it right away.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, he's obsessed with it. That does not surprise me.
And so the last time I was here in April, I was looking through journals from first grade, and we had to write stuff. My teacher was Mrs. Howes, and we had to write stuff each day. And every single day was about soccer. It'd be like, today I played soccer. It was so fun. I scored a goal in the game or something like that. And then the next day it would be, I am playing soccer today, and like my weird writing. And, after about 15, 16 days of that, my teacher started writing like, is there anything else you did? Like, you want to write about anything else? And man, it's literally looking through those journals. It's just pages and pages about soccer. So I was obsessed, and I would go out as I got older. I'd go out to the field and kick balls, for hours. I had bags of soccer balls, and I would kick those for hours. And I developed like this. Not only I was good at it naturally, but then I also developed a really unique kicking motion that I was able to translate into kicking footballs. But looking back at it, yeah, it's interesting to see how much of a one-track mind I had at the time. And yeah, it was, I guess seeing my dad, yeah, he's got this incredible garden on property here. He's got, I don't know, 50 or 60 fruit trees. He's got 6 or 7 hives of bees. He's got all these tomato plants, herbs, blackberries, raspberries, and stuff like that. He's turning 82 next week, and he's still at it every single day. He's out here for hours. He's on his hands and knees pulling weeds. He's doing it the right way. He doesn't spray any of his trees or anything like that. It's all organic. And he puts in the work. He wakes up every day, and this is his gym. This is his playground. And he's extremely bright too. He was a scientist at Harvard. He taught at the medical school there, and he researched at Children's Hospital in Boston. He was a bone biologist. And so he retired a handful of years ago, but he still teaches all this stuff. He picked up beekeeping, and now he lectures on it, and he lectures on gardening. And so he's a continual learner, and very active, and it's inspiring to see him in his playground here.
What an interesting guy. That's super cool.
I should mention my mom too, because she's super inspiring too. She was the first graduating female of her dental class at Tufts University in the early 70s, at a time when not many women were pursuing that career. And so she worked really hard growing up and was a very successful dentist, and was there to drive us to soccer practices and everything like that. So she was very successful and kind of like the breadwinner in a sense, but also was really there. So I had two parents there to look up to, and then I was just kind of running around finding my way. I really had no idea what was going on, honestly, as a kid, but good role models to look up to. Still don't. I joke that my the career transition, I'm sure we'll touch on that at some point, but the only real jobs I've had, I've obviously been a hard worker, dedicated, and everything like that, but the only real jobs I had, I was a soccer ref. I would sell my dad's vegetables at a fruit stand. I was a golf caddy, and then I played professional football. And so it gives you a sense of the career trajectory there, and why trying to fit myself into a traditional office setting or career, it's not a great fit. But I'm finding that I'm on that journey.
Dude, you got the kids there. Like, you should set up the vegetable stand with them, make some money.
Yeah, he's got a full-time farm stand here, so you just drive right on up and buy some fresh produce. 105 Walker Lane. Need a mass if anyone wants to check it
Wow.
out.
Yeah, dude, it was just Seafair here, and one of my clients' kids set up a juice stand at one of the parks and made $500.
Wow. Seriously?
Rad.
Do you think if an adult did that,
Wow.
they would make that much money too?
Yeah. No, they'd be probably
No way.
shut down.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
weird.
you
Yeah.
need a permit or something. That's fucked up, dude.
One
Steve,
of the
Steve, can you remind us what you were pursuing education wise?
Yeah, so I was playing soccer and lacrosse in high school. I was also a science guy doing biology, and then at Middlebury, I majored in neuroscience.
Yeah.
Wow.
Me too.
Yeah.
Lies.
And
We're
then
all
one other
neuroscientists, right?
educational thing, the last 2 years, I've been studying health and human performance. Been getting a master's
Mhm.
degree from Pacific College and that's been one of my mentors, Dr. Bob Grixanic, who both of you guys, all of you guys, maybe James doesn't know him, but he is a one of a kind, 1 in 7 billion type of person, and just a amazing
Yeah.
human being. And he took the same program and recommended it to me. And I didn't really know what I was getting into, but it's really opened my mind a lot to, the complexity of life and how the connectedness of all things mental, physical, spiritual, nutrition, physiology, psychology, all these things kind of connect. And really everything matters to a degree. And if we want to live, our best lives, you have to kind of dive into all these things and understand them. And, I joke about the program because I feel like I'm getting a master's in things that you would assume to be the case. So like, of course you would
Yeah.
assume sleep to be good for you. And you would assume that thinking productive thoughts and positively and doing breathing exercise and all these things, you would assume that those would be good for you. But for some reason, that's not enough for people to do them. Maybe for some it is. But there's something that happens when you learn more about these topics. It expands your understanding of why this stuff's so important, and it makes you more likely to do it. And it still comes back to the habits to actually do it. But if you're educated around why these things are important for you or for all humans, it really helps you make them a part of your life.
Mm.
That's cool.
That's an interesting thought. Like we know that all these things are really good for us, and I want to talk about like playing careers real quick. But when you're playing, you're kind of just like in the mix and in the zone, and you don't think about all of those things, right? You're kind of being told maybe in some way by your teams. But do you think there's something about continuing education while you're playing that makes your brain think a little bit differently? Let's say if you had those tools and you were going through this process as a player, number one, it would take your mind maybe off the game a little bit, which I think looking back would have been a good thing. I think I was a bit wrapped up in, my task all the time and worried and thinking, and maybe some anxiety built around that. But then you go to these like mental checks of what you're going through right now. You're really thinking about how good your sleep is, how good, maybe reading books, these simple little things that you're talking about, having those tools as a player. You think that would have been effective, or is it something that you would still wait to do after you're done playing?
So a few thoughts here. So I look at these Olympic athletes and I see how focused they are and how much it matters to them to succeed. And gosh, can you think about an event like that comes every 4 years? How much pressure there must be, and how much agony when they don't succeed. You can see it on their faces, how excited they are. There was this gymnast in the floor exercise the other day who thought she thought she got bronze, and then they did the rescore at the end, and the American girl won the bronze, and she was out, and you could just see like the emotion of going
Oh,
from, thinking she won this thing that she was so excited about to losing. And I remember that feeling as an athlete because you're so focused on your craft and it's like the only thing in the world that matters. And there's so much motivation to do all the things to help you because that's all that matters to you. So in a lot of ways, it was easier for me to get good sleep and to be disciplined and to eat healthy and to train and to stick to a schedule and to breathe and to meditate when I was playing football because I had like a core reason and focus that I was doing it for. When you open things up and in the transition and you don't have that thing anymore, that's kind of been the journey the last couple of years has been, okay, so then what is this all about? Why would I train? Why would I take care of myself? Why would I do any of that? And first I started to feel like crap pretty quickly when I didn't do that. So it's like, okay, well that's one motivation. And then it was like, okay, my kids need to see me doing this stuff. My kids need to see me taking care of myself. And then it was, oh wow, like there's a lot more life left, and I've got to figure out like, my gift to the world and to really find a way to express that. And so that's kind of that where I'm at right now with it is really honing in on that and getting skilled, building the skills around myself, the resources, meeting people, having conversations, but also refining my messages, with the hopes of sharing something unique with the world and helping a lot of people. So to backtrack, when I was playing, I think it would have been really helpful to have something to balance me. I think learning's amazing. Learning is so good for your mind and to be in a program, it like creates hurdles for you. And it's almost like going to a workout class. Like you're probably not gonna, a lot of people, and maybe we would, but a lot of people wouldn't work out if they weren't in a workout class. And with school, a lot of people say they'll learn, but who's going to actually write papers and read textbooks and read research articles if you don't have an assignment and a grade coming up? So that forcing function is super important. And, like in a lot of ways, like a lot of people, I dread it, but then at the same time, I appreciate it and I'm thankful that I did it and I enjoy the learning process. So I think it would be I don't know because I never did that when I was playing. I was constantly learning, listening to podcasts and everything, but that's different. Podcasts, books are a lot different way of learning than like a structured curriculum and like a repetitive, uh, sequence of classes and papers and all these different ways. Because you learn not just from reading, but from writing, talking, presenting. So it probably would have been a little too much, but I wish I had something to balance me out a little bit more when I was playing football to make me realize, okay, there's more to this life journey than just trying to do the best out on the field that I can.
would things have been different if the framework and the messaging around what Brad's talking about, learning more, uh, guided you to say, hey, this is actually going to help my performance if I switch off and learn about different things. If I
Oh,
am intellectually,
1,000%.
yeah, have humility here, I need to learn more about this stuff so I can refine my craft versus being obsessive over the one aspect that you're controlling, but I need to explore the other avenues. If that's geared towards helping your performance, maybe the brain would be more open to doing that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's a lack. That's something that's lacking in professional sports is teaching young athletes how to be pros.
Mm-hmm.
They spend a lot of time and energy on players, but that specific thing I think is, they tell you to sleep, or they tell you, it's like 3 words. It's like, hey, you should sleep, or here's a sign in the building that says, you need to hydrate. Your pee shouldn't look this color.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the extent of it, and that's more helpful than not having that. But if guys were to really be educated on this as part of their professional athlete journey, I think it would help the teams a ton. You'd have, like, I sometimes laugh at the concept of, you have all these 23, 24-year-old football players coming into the league, and some of them play 3 years, some of them play 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And the difference in them playing 7, 8, 9, 10 years versus 3 might be just because they met somebody outside of the building, like a Dr. Bob or a Ben, Dragavon or Sean, or somebody, some resource that can help connect them to help them improve themselves physically, mentally, technically. And that seems stupid to me, that would come down to the luck of whether they met somebody like that. Like, why not just have a person like that in the building who's teaching them about how to integrate all these resources, teaching them what resources are out there and how to integrate them all into their what works best for them.
Do you think that the guys that search that out, though, like, are the ones that are willing to implement it versus the ones that, like, maybe don't search that out? And even if the team, like, did have them available, like, I know guys that, like, no matter how much you told them what to do or said this is good for you, it's not going to change the way they do it. You know what I mean? Like, some people are open to it, some aren't. And I just think maybe, like, the guys that search it out and find that, and, like, it does help them, are the ones that, like, would have used it if it was at the field, you know?
I look at Tom Brady, you have to, attribute a decent percentage of his success to his open-mindedness to go out there and find resources. Like Alex Guerrero, he probably did, had a chef. He probably had 10 other things that we don't know about. Or Bryson DeChambeau, you look at what he's doing in golf. He's doing muscle activation technique with Greg Roscoff. I know he's got a brain training protocol, but he's probably got 6 or 7 other things that he's doing too. So those resourceful people with open minds, willing to try stuff, willing to cut things out, whatever's helping them the best. I think those are actually, at this stage of the game, there's still a few freak athletes, but to me, it's the guys that do the best in the long run are the freaks that find a way, the freaks at accumulating and integrating these resources. So if you're a professional football team or a professional sports team across the board, why don't you make the program around ensuring that all these 23-year-olds are exposed to this stuff?
I think that's part of the evolution of modern sports as well. Because historically, you could kind of push, grind. And now I think the research is showing that that's not the most effective way. So you have to start exploring these other ways to create percentage points of refinements in your performance. And, physically, you can tap things out. So now we're talking about load management. So you peak at games and managing that the correct way. So what else can you train and refine? It's the mental side, it's the psycho-spiritual side, it's the stuff off the field and the environments that you're creating for performance. So it's about looking at that whole picture now.
You have a few individual athletes that I think are at the tip of the spear here, but you could argue that the teams could integrate that pretty quickly too. They could scale those same systems very quickly.
Depending on who's running it, yeah.
Yeah, they could. I mean, you find, like, some teams are willing to spend the money to do that. Others aren't. You know what I mean?
I don't think it costs that much, to be honest. That's the
Yeah.
funny thing about it too, in relation to what's spent on the salary cap. and miss
I think
injury and like injuries and all these other wasted
I think the
talent.
real cost isn't financial. The real cost is a threat to the status quo and how things have evolved over time.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the biggest threat. That's the cost that people's jobs might not be as secure as they are historically, or they need to start evolving and shifting where they've been comfortable for 10, 15 years doing their same old shit. That's the real hump to get over, and it's re-envisioning the body view and what we need to do to train it the right way. And it's old school
Yeah,
thought processes versus the evolved modern development of what's happening in sports.
Yeah, I think it's a threat to, a coaching staff. I think that's
mm-hmm.
the biggest issue inside. I would say the Sounders locker room or any soccer locker room. That's the only thing I really know. But I'm trying to imagine a world, and this was when I was retiring. I had approached, Taylor at the Sounders, and I said, "This is what I want my job to be." And all I wanted to be was not. You are obviously more educated than I, Steve, on this subject, but I just wanted to be a conduit between the players and the coaches and be in the locker room and be that guy who's had the experience. And I know my own boundaries. I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes. I'm not trying to provide tactics unless it's given to me by the coach and the okay to talk to players about that. But I remember being in a locker room, and as soon as Ziggy or Schmetz walked in one side of the locker room, I would immediately just get up and walk out the back kind of exit, right, and go into the players' lounge. I didn't want anything to do with a head coach because I knew that in my mind, I always assumed that it was going to be bad. If I got brought in for a conversation or whatever it was, I just had this defense mechanism set up that was like, well, if he's talking to me now outside of the field, it must be bad. I'm either getting traded or he's going to, talk about another player. I don't want to be involved with that. I want to walk out the other side. But imagine a guy who's has those touch points already in the locker room. That's not a player, but he's been through it before. And the coach can kind of say, okay, this is what we want out of you. And it's to, take a group of the youngsters and go do something outside of the locker room in soccer. Go to a cooking class or, do something that's a bit more creative that the guys can kind of get their mind off of soccer. And for the older guys, it's just, reaffirming what they've already done. If you've been in the league for 10 years, you don't need a coach saying X, Y, and Z every single day. These guys have had Schmetz for 10 years. They don't need to hear, the same tactics every single week. They just need a refresh and a guy to kind of like pump them up. And it's different. Like Andy Rose does a great job of that with the guys on the team, but he's also a coach. So there's still that perception of a coach being not approachable. And, you don't, you trust coaches, but also you're kind of afraid that they're going to go in the coach's room and be like, this guy's struggling today. But if you really had that guy in the locker room, that's, maybe Steve with your, now getting your master's, like that to me seems like a needle in a haystack still for some reason. And I don't know, maybe teams do have it and we just don't hear about it, but I'm not aware of anyone in Major League Soccer. Yeah, you've got a sports psychologist, but do you really have someone there that's, building these guys up that aren't necessarily a coach? I thought that would be so beneficial, but then you get, a coaching staff that's like, oh, we adding someone else to the mix. And I'm worried about my job at the end of the day. But I think you're right. There is something there. I don't know. Could that be possible in baseball? Is there anything like that in Major League Baseball?
Guys come in from time to time. Like a team will have older players, like retired players come in and just kind of like hang out.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's very structured. There's not really much of a message, just sort of like they're just in there hanging out. Like when I was in New York, Swisher would come in, Andy Pettit would come in. I know that Pettit was paid by the team. I think he was like a special assistant or like something like that. A lot of those kind of like legendary players end up being special assistants to teams and whatnot. But nothing really like crazy, but it was cool to have those guys around. Like I was a huge fan of Andy Pettit growing up. So when he would come around, I'd try to like be around him and ask him questions and stuff like that. And I found that super valuable. So I think that if teams did just stuff like that more, even if it wasn't like a position that someone held that was there all the time, but if the teams just brought in ex players more often to just hang out for a couple of days or something like that, it might benefit, especially I think younger players. Because when I was in New York, I was still fairly young. I was like 30 or something like that, and I felt like that was super valuable for me and super cool to have him around, kind of pumping me up, like you're saying.
And I think it's not just in sports, it's also in business. And this idea is something I've thought a lot about. People want stimulation. They want um, they want to learn and grow, and like they can't do that if there's nothing there, if there's nothing interesting, or no new thoughts, or no new content, or no new people. It really takes a village. And one of the things Coach Carroll did that was really, really amazing is he would bring in speakers, or just like they'd be friends of the team. I mean, it helped that we were on top of the world at the time. So like Drake came into practice, and, Will Ferrell and people like that. But Dr. Angela Duckworth, who's researcher, she wrote the book Grit. She came in and spoke to the team, and it's a really cool opportunity to just focus on something a little bit different that's helpful, and everybody picks up little nuggets, and it just keeps the team, everybody in the building, like takes something from that. Just having a researcher come in and talk about grit, like what a brilliant thing. And now your team's focused on grit, and like they're reframing all the difficult things in their lives as good now, and it's making them stronger. Like, wow, okay, so we brought in this person who's now shifted everybody's perception in the building. We're now a stronger team because of it. And so little things like that can really go a long way, because the monotony, and I imagine baseball, I can't even imagine what culture is like in baseball, because it's such an individual sport, and you have 162 games and playoffs, and everybody's probably like either on a hitting streak or pitching streak, or like on a slump. They're in some, right?
Yeah.
Throughout the year. And so there's all these different emotions going on. It's like boring at points in the season. I can't even imagine. I would love to understand that, but it's, people need to be lifted up. And this is one of my other core thesis is like the leader's job is to kind of brainwash everybody around them into a specific vision, but also everybody takes on the thoughts of the leader. So if you have like a pessimistic, negative coach, most people aren't aware enough, and they're going to start to take on those thoughts of the coach.
Mm-hmm.
And that can really hamper performance. And you don't have to be like Coach Carroll and have this super like, yeah, we're going to go win. Like, we're ready to go. We got this type of attitude all the time. But we have 60,000 thoughts a day approximately. And a majority of those are negative, like probably 75% of those are negative for most people. So when you have a leader who is coming in and giving you, in the 20 minutes he's talking to everybody every day, if he's giving you 80% positive stuff, that raises the vibe of everybody in the building. And that helps people be more productive, more focused. And it doesn't have to be out of line, like unrealistic type of talk, but it's this framing. It's the way you frame everything that happens. So you could have a loss, but you could look at all the good things that happen in the loss and think that you're getting stronger as a team. Versus like you could have a pessimistic coach and you could win, and he could be pointing out all the bad stuff you did, and you think you guys are in the tank. So there was a year the year before I got to Seattle, the team went 7-9, and they made the playoffs. And it was like the team, and hearing from John Ryan about it, he was like, he jokes like they thought they won the Super Bowl that year because they thought they were such a good team, because they were just like, even though they had a losing record, Pete kind of made them focus on all the good things that they were building.
That's pretty cool.
I'm curious about like the quantification of a person or a role or a culture that's positive, because I think for someone, thinking skeptically about like somebody coming in and giving a 20-minute talk, or having like a leadership person come in and being like a buffer, or even like a specialist, or a coach that you hire to come in and do a culture shift, is like, how do you quantify that? Like that's really, for in my mind, I would think that both players and people within the organization could be pretty skeptical of someone coming in and doing a talk, because like, how do you know if that translates to performance optimization? You just like, what are we doing here?
And that's why nobody does it. And that's
Oh,
why
I do
nobody
it.
does it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ben does it. But
quantify that those outcomes.
well, I'm saying
Yes.
teams have a hard time quantifying that. Businesses have even a harder time. You know, businesses have your businesses are run really tight, obviously, and they don't think about the people that are behind the business very much. And so there's not really much to support the employees of a traditional business. And I take the same theory that in business, if you provide resources to people and improve the leadership and culture, it directly translates to results. And once again, I don't think it costs that much compared to what's spent everywhere else in the budget. But
So
Ben, what are
so
you
the
saying
way
about quantifying that?
so the way we do it with the company I partnered with out of London is you measure uh, three different things. One is, first, conceptually and philosophically, you have to understand that personal values are your drivers of your behavior. So you can survey, say, within a company, everyone's personal values, and we have this big vocabulary lexicon that you pick these words from, and then you could match that up with what their desired values are, and then you could match that up with what they experience day to day, and then you can quantify and see where there's areas of disconnect within a company culturally, or where there's areas that are doing really, really well. And we have it on graphs, percentages, cultural health, psychological safety. It just puts it out there right in front of your face, so you can't really argue it, and it just gives you a good idea, where do you need to work on this thing culturally to get everyone aligned. And it's based off the Schwartz model in psychology, which has over 4,000 peer-reviewed articles all over the world, and it just shows you. So, and the idea is that these personal values, that you can't necessarily change them, because it's part of it's how you grew up, right? And a lot of it's mapped down. But if you have enough awareness of it, you can start to bring these things closer to alignment, and hopefully get more cohesive towards your goal, and your cultural environment and environmental health increases.
Feel like sometimes positivity can be hard, because like sometimes when you're being super positive, it's like it almost seems fake. And I read this
Yeah.
book about like neutrality, like being neutral. So when you have a negative thought, it's like, what is actually true? Because I think like a lot of the negativity comes from like attaching an emotion to something that's happening, versus like what's actually happening. And you know, yeah, I just think that like sometimes you
Yeah.
can have something bad going on, and you can just kind of like, okay, what's actually happening right now versus how do I feel about what's happening? Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
And I think, we have this kind of down in our brainstem, we have this reptilian brain that is scanning the environment for threats, and everything that happens in our lives, we, label it as good or bad, positive or negative. And a lot of the things, you know, there's like this sense of survival and like fear, and like we're scared. We've got this thing that perceives threats. And so ultimately it's not about like blind positivity. It's about trying to create, or trying to cultivate more productive thoughts. And so I think most people would agree that having 100% negative thoughts is not going to be very productive. Having 100% positive thoughts is probably also not going to be, the most productive. So it's about, especially if that's not based in reality. So it's about finding that balance. And I think each person probably has their own healthy balance for what helps them be most productive. And so staying true to that. And the other part is this, and this was kind of my journey as a player. I had fears, I had concerns. I was scared early in my career to go out there and kick in front of 70,000 people. And so I would acknowledge those. I found this process called emotional freedom technique that was taught to me by my kicking coach. Sean's nodding his head. And I would acknowledge those fears, and just acknowledging them, just, whatever the fear is, it could be, I'm concerned about the wind in tonight's game because it's going to be windy, man, and I want to have a good game. And it can affect the ball, and it's not something I can really control. So just acknowledging that kind of takes the weight out of it. I think a lot of times people hold on to it, I'm not scared. So just acknowledging, hey, I've got this concern. I've got this concern about the win. Okay. Now because I've acknowledged it, I can release it. And when you release it, you're consciously saying, is it gone 100%? Maybe not, but is 80% of that fear, concern gone after the tapping session? Yeah. And so I would just kind of acknowledge that concern. I would release it. And it was through this tapping process, which you can look it up, emotional freedom technique. And there's a lot of kind of powerful self-talk in it. And ultimately at the end of the 10 or 15 minutes of doing this, I'm building up my confidence and my belief in myself and my trust in myself, and tapping in literally into my own love, courage. It's this courage is tied deeply to love and very interconnected. And courage is this feeling of I can do it. I can do something hard. And I think it's intimately connected with love of yourself, of being vulnerable to go fail because you know that you're doing your best. And so I think that's a strength. And so I would tap into that belief and trust of myself, because ultimately when I wanted to go out there feeling I got this, I believe in myself, I trust myself, I can go for this. And so that's how I overcame the fears associated with kicking in front of thousands of people. And it became, the fears are always shifting. You always have different fears too. So they changed over the years I was playing, but that's the state that I wanted to get into when I was out on the field.
Sounds like you're choosing to walk into the storm versus trying to run away from it. That's how I've had it explained to me, is when you have the awareness and you see something and you accept it, you see what it is, and you choose to walk into the storm instead of hiding away. I'm not scared. I'm not afraid of failure. Instead of you can look at that and be yeah, sure, of course I want to do well, but I can't promise myself that. What can I promise myself? That I'm going to give it everything I got. I'm going to go out here and do this thing, and you choose to look right at it and take one step, walk headfirst into the storm versus trying to run away. And if you're running away from it, it's just going to make it stronger. Whereas if you walk into the storm, you're taking it head on,
Totally.
I love that.
Well, I think that there's an opportunity too. I mean, with looking at who's talking here, from, a couple of guys who are retired. That's, someone who's, getting towards the back end of their playing career. Those skills also translate into real life. Those skills around, relationships, around, the loss of a loved one, these sorts of things that we engage with every single day and kind of take for granted, apply directly, not just to how you kick a football or how you kick a soccer ball or save a soccer ball or throw a baseball, or it also applies into your life. And so I'm kind of curious, Steve, like how you're applying some of this stuff now as you transition and create the next chapters in your life.
Yeah, it's funny because that I talked earlier about this motivation to do everything, and it helped. I think it helped to have that motivation that I was on the national stage. Like, of course, you're gonna train all off season and get ready for that, so you don't look like an idiot.
Yeah, yeah.
That's part of the motivation. Yeah, and yes, also I want to be the best that I can possibly be. I want to be the best kicker in the league. So there's these competing thoughts, right? This, negative kind of, I don't want to look like an idiot. I better get going. And, I want to be the best, like super positive, like I can do this type of thing. So I think there's this yin and yang of, there's always a polarity and a balance that you have to find. The biggest challenge, and I'm sure that Ben and Brad can speak to this, is what it just feels like there's like what is that thing? Like there was football that was before, and now it's like, what's that thing? And you can see I'm getting close around it, right? But I'll be the first to admit, like I'm not like in that thing yet. And I don't know if that's an identity thing or if it's like literally I don't know, what my daily work looks like when I wake up, whether that's it. But that's like the process of what I'm trying to figure out, because that's a very important part of life, is to have purpose and to have something tangible that you can put your energy into, that you feel proud about and that you feel like is worthy of your time and effort. So I'm bouncing around that.
Do you feel like you're do you feel like you're searching more now? Excuse me. Do you feel like you're searching more now for something that brings you joy? Because I've heard about, like, the first part of your life is climbing the mountain of achievement, right? You've done that in your football career, and now it's kind of like you're searching out something that brings you joy, and it sounds like you're doing all this higher education, you're learning a lot, and it's going to be in service of people, helping people. Um, and I've heard that, like, that's how you bring joy. That's how you, like, achieve joy, is by helping other people versus doing something for yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge. Like, I was naturally gifted at kicking. I mean, and then it's taken away from you. That's really what it felt like. So I'm not to say that I'm Michelangelo, but if I was like a extremely gifted artist and then all of a sudden you have to stop doing it at 35, it feels like I was cut off from my expression of, this natural gift that I had. And so I'm on this journey of finding what my natural gifts are and like how to express those most effectively and make a difference in the world. And then with the added caveat of, like, trying to support my family while I do all that.
I think that idea of, like, reinvention is something that we all have to deal with. It's the one thing that we can count on, is that something's going to change. Something's going to change, like maybe tomorrow, maybe next year, and how we deal with that, and then decide, okay, well, what's my path? What am I going to focus on? Where am I going to put my attention? James, you just moved across the country. like you just, okay, here's a change. Here's a change. Deal with it. That's for everybody, and I'm kind of curious because you're just recently going through this transition from one team to another, from one coast to another, and time zones and lifestyle and family and particulars. Like, what do you think are some of the things that are helping you deal with that change that all of us, every single person alive, is going to have to deal with some change or another?
Accepting it, realizing that I have no control over this. Obviously the playing part of it's fine. It's great that I'm somewhere that I've already been, coming back to Boston. I came into a warm welcome. I knew a lot of the guys, knew the coach, knew the faces, all that kind of stuff. So that made it comfortable. The hardest part for me is the family piece of it, because my family's not going to join me in Boston for 2 months. It's just too big of a move with the two young kids. So they're staying in LA, and then they're going to go back to Seattle in a couple weeks. And, so I'm out in Boston on my own. I think they're going to come out and visit a time or two. But just being away from the family is the hardest part. I also know that I'm getting close to the finish line of my career. And I think like this is it for me. Is like I'm gonna finish out these last couple months, hopefully get some postseason baseball in. I think that's what's helping my wife get through too, is knowing that like there's light at the end of the tunnel, because she's ready for this to be over. And so we're just kind of like white knuckling it until the end of the season, and then and then we'll be kind of living regular life after that.
I just want to ask, because I talk to a lot of guys like Jordan, I mean, they're still, in their low 30s, right? But they've already played for 10 years, right? They came out into the league pretty early. And even at, 32, they're feeling that grind and kind of maybe that mindset that you're talking about right now. I would say from my perspective is I was absolutely in that place of, I went to Kansas City, tried to play last year, and I knew that the end was coming close. And I think I was too focused on what was going to happen next instead of trying to just really enjoy those last, I guess what I'm trying to say is I wish that I had a different mindset in the tail end of my career, instead of thinking about, man, what's next? And really, maybe I could have played another, 2 or 3 years if I had the tools, mentally to kind of keep going and keep pushing. So I just hearing you talk about that and kind of like that, I think switching the narrative a little bit and, allowing yourself to like be present in that moment. Yes, you are a little bit older, but also like really trying to absorb and appreciate where you're at, and who knows, in shift of a mindset and saying, nope, I still got 3 or 4 more years, whether you want to or not, but allowing that to kind of take over in your performance too. I reflect on that and think like, oh fuck yeah, I had an injury, but man, if I would have just taken that option year and not declined it and had a different mindset, like maybe things would have been different. Maybe I would have played till I was 35, and had a couple good years and been a part of and more good teams. But I know that that's really difficult. And I just think even switching that narrative and how you talk about it, could be really cool and really key to see, the finish of this season and then push into next season also. Because, I mean, you had a great result, last night?
2 nights ago, yeah.
2 nights ago?
Yeah.
Like, freaking riding that wave, and allowing that to push yourself forward. And I guess the concepts are all the same, because when I talk to high school kids that are saying, I don't know if I want to play in college and this, and I'm just like, you got to do it. You got to push. Whether, it's not necessarily push like physically demanding, but switching the mindset of just give it a shot. You never know what can happen. And I still think you got fucking gas in the tank. And there's nothing to be said more than experience. And the family's going to be there at the end of the day. The family's not going anywhere.
Right.
Whether
I think
do think that or not. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I can still do it. I know I can still go out there and compete. I think like I don't have the same stuff that I used to, but I think I have like a much better mental approach to the game, and like that allows me to compete at a high level still. And I could definitely still like if I wanted to, I could get a job next year, and like there's part of me that wants to,
Mhm.
but my family's ready for me to be done. My family's ready for me to come home and be around more often. My son's having a really hard time with me not being there right now. My wife is having a hard time, so there's a pull there. I think like
Mhm.
it's a tough one for me. I'm working on it right now, working my way through it. Is like, there's part of me that still wants to go and still play, and I know that I can still play and compete and have success. But there's also this like family piece, and like my family's ready for me to be home, and be done. So it's a hard. I feel like I'm being torn
Mhm.
in two ways. Because I love playing baseball. I love competing. I love being around my teammates and working towards a shared goal. But I think there's a time, when life takes over, and like your responsibility as a husband, as a parent, I think is kind of pulls harder. I think that that's probably going to win out for me. Is my kind of responsibility to my family, and like my want to be around my family more, and
Mhm.
all that stuff. But that being said, I am kind of like picking my head up and looking around the stadium, taking it all in, and enjoying these last couple months of playing with these guys. And that's the great part about being back in Boston this year too, is just like being able to finish with like friends, people that I've known for a couple of years, so I can really just enjoy myself. And I'm just enjoying the competition and walking into the storm. And like I was talking about with house money, is like, it's like I'm not shying away from anything. If I'm going out, if this is it for me, it's everything I got on every pitch. Like I'm gonna go out fighting and try to help my team make it to the postseason and maybe win a World Series. It'd be a heck of a way to end it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Well, in a lot of
For
ways, that
sure.
should almost be the mindset all the time, right?
Oh,
When
absolutely.
you
It is. It's just hard
the
to do.
the the appreciation, that any one game could be your last one, right? Um,
Hmm.
and I think for me, I really hear you. I'd love to talk more, probably off camera, about your journey there and with your family and everything, because that's super interesting. And I was there a few years ago, and my kids are 6, 4, and 1 right now. And those early years for your kids are so important. I mean, there's nothing more important to me than to be there for my kids, especially, yeah, I can't imagine. That's hard. And people don't realize, that athletes have to deal with this,
Hmm.
living away from their families, especially baseball. That's such a challenge. Like football, we didn't get the guaranteed money, but we did only have 16, 17, 18 games a season that, you'd be gone for at max 2 nights every other every other week. So,
Hmm.
we'd be only gone, I don't know, 20 days a year. Training camp was kind of the most, and that was like 3 weeks. But yeah, when my son was born, I had to go off to training camp the next day, and that was like devastating for me to leave my newborn son for the first. I got to see him 2 or 3 days of the first 3 weeks of his life. That was really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough for us because like I'm home for dinner once, twice a month during the season.
Wow.
You know. We're playing every day, every night, and I'm on the road every other week, and
Yeah.
I'm not around a lot, and it's tough on the kids, and I'm just I've worked on being present when I'm at home, and I've gotten much better at that. Um, in the last few years. And like, so when I'm home, I'm home. I don't bring the game home with me. When I was younger, I would bring the game home with me, and I'd be riding the roller coaster of how am I doing on the field is kind of like how I'm feeling as a human, versus like, can I leave how I'm doing it on the field, like at baseball and then, or at the field, and then come home and just be James, and now be a husband, be dad. And, it's great. I love being home with the family and stuff like that. It's just like the time, I don't get the amount of time that I feel like they need from me in baseball, just because we're at the field so much.
I rode that. I had a hard time with that same thing, that roller coaster. And I even set up routines driving home from practice and from games. I would go stop at a little area and just like try to really let go of the day before I went home, and like gather myself and be like, here's how I want to be when I get home. And so I was intentional about it, and it was still hard. Like an hour later, I'd find myself like thinking about my kicking motion and the upcoming game. It's hard. It's hard to tame the mind, man. It's hard.
It is.
That doesn't change in the real world either, boys, because I do that every day.
It really doesn't.
My neighborhood. I pause.
And James, that's what I was going to say. You're, that kind of white knuckling and stuff like that. There's definitely a mental challenge here for you that I'm sure you can embrace and like succeed with. Because sports makes you look forward and back so much more so than I think normal life, because you're just constantly looking forward to that time when things are a little different, or you look back at like a result that you had that was either, usually that one that you weren't too thrilled about. And, that exercise.
I find that like when I'm competing, it's really
so important.
Yeah, I do that a lot. Like when I'm pitching, there's a lot of self-talk going on. It's the walking into the storm. It's being where your feet are. It's responding to the negative thoughts. It's telling my ego to get lost. And I find a way to stay very focused and very like in the moment, because I think like in sport, and I'm guessing in life, to be your best self, to be the most successful in any moment you're in, is to fully be in that moment, because you can see guys that are out there competing and you can just tell when they're not fully there. They're thinking about what just happened or what's going to happen. I think it's really tough when you're young too, for these guys that first come up. They're worried about getting sent down, and it's hard to compete when you're thinking about what's going to happen if I don't do this or don't do that.
It's such a paradox, though, because you're constantly training for what's going to happen next. You're preparing for that next thing, whether that's a game on Saturday or Sunday or whatever, while simultaneously reflecting on what you just did, and then you're being told to be in the present.
Impossible.
Yeah. That's why
be present. Be present while you watch yourself fuck up in this last game, and be present while we're preparing for this team that's about to fuck you up, and be present. Tricky.
It is tricky, and that's why you're a professional, and you have to figure out how to do that. Not everyone can do it, and that's why not everyone does it. If it were easy, it's like that old adage, like if it was easy, anybody would do it. It's not easy. But who said it was going to be easy?
But you can be present. You can be intentional about, okay, now's the time to plan. I'm going to like look forward and plan, focus on what's coming up. And you can also be intentional about, hey, now's the time to reflect. I'm going to look back. What went well? What can I improve on? And now, okay, past and future are good. Let's just be here now. I think the thing is we get taken, the ego just kind of takes us forward and back, like a seesaw all the time. And we're never balanced in the middle, just constantly going.
I think it's like,
if we're not aware.
Yeah, I feel like you have to have a response to your thoughts about the past and the future. Like if you can give yourself time to look at those things and like have a response to it, versus just like it being there and you not really knowing what to do with it. I think that if you have an answer to your thoughts, then you've like actually dealt with your thoughts instead of like just like them always there like yapping at you. You know what I mean?
Mm. So you're
Yeah.
saying you
Well,
need to process them a little.
Yeah, I think you gotta give yourself time to process your thoughts about the future and the past. And I think like some people journal, they write it down, and so you can get it out of your head. But I think however you do it, you have to, you know, respond to your thoughts, not just like have them always there yapping at you. Because if you have a response to it, doesn't mean those thoughts are going to come in. But I think like the more times you respond to it in the same way, the less often those thoughts are going to come in, and the further apart they'll be.
Can you give me an example?
Oh, let me think. Um, so when I'm pitching, um, I will have a thought about about failing. Let's say, like I'll think about like, oh, say we're up in a game 3-1, something like that, and there's a guy on second, and I've got one out, and we got to hit at the plate, and a thought will pop in and be like, oh, don't give up a homer right here. What you don't want to let them tie the game or something like that, right? And it's like, okay, I see that thought, and it doesn't change what I'm going to do right now. Like, okay, I understand that you have that fear, but like it doesn't change what I'm going to do, what my process is. So I stay in my process, and I see, that's there, but I'm able to be like, okay, yeah, I see you, instead of like shying away from it. It's like, yeah, I see that you're scared. That's okay. What are we going to do about it? What am I going to do right now? And I get my processes. I get my pitch. I see the last 10 feet of the pitch in my mind, and then I throw the shit out of it. And that's it. And I do that over and
Would you
over and
have
over.
any
And I feel like
thoughts? Would you have any thoughts of like what is the process? Is there like a throwing thought that you have?
about like how to throw the ball.
Like you see that fear thought or that negative thought, and
Mhm.
then is there kind of a positive one that you then say to yourself, or you just like it sounded like process. So you're saying, hey, let's go back to the process. But what is the process, or what's the cue there for you to know that you're on the process in the process?
Well, I think the process for me is like I like what I just said. Like I come back. I'm almost like a robot out there. Like for me, it's I'm gonna get my pitch. I'm gonna see it, and I'm gonna throw the crap out of it, and nothing else matters. Like it doesn't matter how I feel. Doesn't matter what my emotions are. Doesn't matter if I'm sad, happy, scared. It doesn't matter. Like this is what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Um, it's it's like you see guys that are like that are sick, that go out and have great games because they're not thinking about they're not thinking about being sick, and sometimes that can actually like help you. Like
Yeah.
sometimes guys are sick, and like it kind of like you don't have time. You're not thinking about those negative thoughts or whatever. You're just in the moment because you're almost like kind of unaware of what else is going on, thought process. All you can think about is being sick, but then you're like, all right, it doesn't matter that I'm sick. I still have to do this. It's the same thing with
I
thoughts. It's like, it doesn't matter how I feel. I still have to do this.
when you're sick, I think sometimes you're giving everything you have at the moment just to show up and play. But there's not any extra energy to have a lot of thoughts or to, try to be perfect or, to
Hmm.
try to do something different than
Hmm.
you normally do. You just are like, hey, this is all I got. I'm just going to try to get through it. And sometimes you just give yourself permission to kind of be pretty good. And
Hmm.
sometimes you just being pretty good actually is great. So, and
Yep.
the other,
That's
Yeah.
so
fascinating. I love that.
for me with kicking, I would see, I would like, I was just trying to be laser focused on like having a confident swing. And so it always come back to confident swing, confident swing. And sometimes there would be no thought at all, which I was cool with. But if I was, it could have been I would treat them all equally. There could be a fan yelling that I would hear, and you don't even hear what they say, but just the act of them yelling and you hear the anger in their voice, it just kind of, it just feels negative. Or I have a thought, you know, that's not all that productive, pretty negative, about the wind or, about the situation in the game. God, I better make this or something like, oh, I don't want to miss one here. You're always kind of analyzing where you are. The ego's kind of analyzing where you are in the season and like whether it's a miss that you could afford to make or not. I don't know why, but it just kind of increases the pucker factor if it's like a really hairy situation.
Mm-hmm.
But or it could be a defensive lineman on the other side of the field, chirping at you, trying to get you to be distracted. But I would always bring it back to like confident swing. And I would do that most of the time. But even if I couldn't, even if I was still in like shitty thought town, I could still make kicks most of the time. But it wasn't going to give me the best chance. If I was in shitty thought town, it was probably, maybe I'm a 70% kicker. But if I'm in like confident thought mode, if I'm in confident town, maybe I'm a 90% kicker, right? So I think it's interesting to hear your strategies because I think we all kind of develop them, in the pressure. It's like, and I'd love to learn more too from your process because they're like we're all like diamonds, formed in the rough, in the pressure of all these different situations. That's where the mental game comes from, and then you just study people who've done it, and it's but pitcher, golfer, kicker, quarterback, I think those are kind of the top ones. Actually, I think these Olympic athletes,
Goalkeeper too.
goalie.
Well, there's a reason why. Goalies
being
don't
a field player is nothing, Brad. Sorry.
Well, these are positions that your heart rate's not up either, so you can't get lost in the exercise component of it. You have the ability to get lost in your thoughts. So, like for me, I played in front of crowds ranging from 12 humans to 50,000, and sometimes 12 is tougher because you can hear everything they're saying, like, and you can pick it out. And the way I always adjusted for that was just to kind of humanize myself and sometimes even engage and joke around back with them. And it just took it off the boil almost, versus letting it get to me and just laugh at some of the shit they're saying. Like, oh, that kind of evens the playing field. And then they either switch off or it just changes the whole like idea of what's going on here, and you just play at that point, so it's always a tricky one,
Well, you accepted it, right? It's like if you're fighting something, if you're fighting a thought, then you're focusing on fighting the thought. Whereas if you like accept what's happening and like you accepted it by like joking back with them, then you've left that over here. You're not you're not looking at the ball coming in, thinking about these dudes talking. Like you're like, oh, don't talk to me, don't talk to me. You've acknowledged it, the thought, the whatever, so that you can come back over here. I feel like if it's all about awareness, and like even if it's not like fans yelling at you, it's a thought in your brain. It's like if you pretend it's not there, it's still there, But like if you see that thought and you deal with that thought, then it allows you to then come back and be focused. It's like if you fight.
What are the other options? Are you going to fight them? Like, are you going to fight your thought? I mean, it's not going to work out.
Like
you're not going to win, Yeah.
Goalie, I think, is so hard because.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say goalie, I think, is really hard. You're literally defending a space for your team, and people are coming at you and trying to get by you.
Yeah.
And I was helping out this lacrosse goalie, and he just got pelted with shots. Like, not only physically does it hurt, but they get so many thoughts throughout the day, and or sorry, so many shots throughout a game, and I like felt for the guy. I was like, man, this is a tough position. Like, how are you supposed to keep your confidence up, when there's 15 goals going in a game?
Hmm.
It's one thing if, and how do you perceive the difference between good shot, like having a good game when 15 goals go in, and having a bad game when like maybe 10 goals should have gone in and you let 15 in? Because the quality of the shots matter a lot. So I think with goalies, it's really important to have, a third party who tells you like how you did or what shots you should have saved. I don't know. Maybe that inherently
Well,
in
for
soccer.
sure. Now, for my career, and I don't want to dive too far into goalkeeping, but because no one's really interested. But as a backup keeper, I came off of pro games exhausted because I was thinking the whole time. Because as a goalie, you're kind of watching everything going on, and the best goalkeepers in the world don't have to face that many shots, thus lowering the percentage of shots that have the opportunity to go in. So, like Casey Keller, he did it all with his voice. I mean, he could make saves, obviously, but the way he organized and did it all, it was all here. So you're coming away from those things, those games, much more mentally fatigued than you are actually physically.
Mm.
It's in the top keepers. It's not about, if it gets to you, it's a series of mistakes, and then you have to save it. But the best keepers, Hope Solo, for another one, she did her voice. I mean, she was one of the top goalkeepers in the league, only facing 2 shots per game. And it wasn't because we were so good. It was because she was so good at organizing people. And she doesn't get enough credit for that type of stuff.
Mm.
It's just interesting. How do you manage it? How do you win this game? And for that position, it's mental.
I always remember Ziggy. Well, the one thing that stuck out to me was he would always say, and from a young age, that you should be physically exhausted, of course, but also mentally exhausted after a game. You can't just be one or the other. That means you're lost and you're not ready for that level. But if you are physically able to exhaust yourself, but also you come into the locker room and you're just mentally like checked out and exhausted, that means that you were in tune to the game, right? If you come in after the game and yes, you're physically exhausted, but you're joking around with friends and you're having this great time, he would say, even if you win, like, yeah, you're going to be happy, but also even if you win, you weren't fully 100% present in the moments that you should have been.
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me for some reason, and tried to, like you said, though, you're in a very aerobic sport if you're a field player, so you can get lost in the game quite a bit more. But yeah, for your like more specialized positions, I would imagine, especially with my ADHD brain, I would have a hard time. I'd be looking around the stadium, oh, it's my turn to go on, right? Like staying in tune has got to be really, really difficult as a pitcher, goalkeeper, or as a kicker.
It's tough.
With some of you guys being coaches, I'm curious about how some of this translates to kids or to younger youth athletes. I mean, the answer is obvious. Yes, we should be teaching these kids these skills. Yes, we should be giving them frameworks and tools that they can apply, because it will make them, not only better in their sport, but also happier people. Like how much harder is that? Because I know, Brad, Ben, you guys are coaches. How much of this applies to like a standout teenage athlete? Does it translate? Can they handle it?
I mean, from my experience, I always just tell the players, like, this is your moment throughout the day to be present. Like, you shouldn't be thinking about anything else. Like, I don't want you thinking about, I think I echoed this in the first podcast, is this is your 1 hour out of the day where you don't have to worry about school. You don't have to worry about relationships. Just try and be present. That's the only thing I ask of them when it comes to, trying to be mentally there and tuned in. I try to create an environment that is, pretty lighthearted, but when it's time to work, we're going to work hard. And so, starting the training out with some sort of fun exercise to get the kids engaged and get them off the brain of school and then into a training session that is going to be lighthearted and fun. But then that's the first part. And then it's time to work. So allowing them to be kids in the beginning and just have fun, whether it's tic-tac-toe or some race game, some small competition where they're laughing and, we're joking around. And then it's the ability to switch on and say, okay, now it's time to actually warm up and be ready for the task at hand. And I just have to constantly remind them, like, I'm only asking really of like 40 minutes of hard work, because you got water breaks, you got a good warm up, and then you got a cool down. So give me 40 minutes. That's what I'm asking of you. And if you can do that, we're going to be a successful team. And then relying on, the more veteran players to kind of lead that too. I think they understand it more than a freshman, sophomore, and some of the juniors. But giving the team the responsibility of leading in a way that, they are experienced enough now to know that if they don't do the work now in the first week of preseason, they're not going to be in the state final like they were last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, right? A successful team. So there's a benchmark. And I think once you hit that benchmark, that culture kind of permeates through, which is pretty fun and really cool to see and be a part of.
I think this is an entire series of podcast episodes just on that one question, because there's a lot that goes into that. But Brad hit it on the head with, especially for this modern world we're living in, the environment that you're providing for the kids needs to be, they need to have an expectation that it's going to be a positive experience, I think. And Steve alluded to this earlier. Positive doesn't mean like we're holding hands and doing all this stuff, but it needs to be, there needs to be clarity, and there needs to be trust that they're going to be better for doing it on the other end, because a lot of kids need that experience this day and age. If school's beating them down, social is beating them down, their life at home's beating them down, or any of those factors, the environment that you're providing in the sporting world needs to be in a positive experience for them. It needs to be that outlet, because we talk about, cognitive bandwidth and how much people can absorb from a learner standpoint. They're all coming in at different levels of readiness to absorb the information you're giving them. And if you have an environment that's going to be negative, it's going to shrink it. They're going to shut down even more. So it's critical to create that environment where they can be absorbing. They can be in a play state, even with high standards. They know that you're supporting them, that you have to put these metrics in place so it has the opportunity to be successful. And then you can pretend to start working with them.
So Ben and I have been chatting about this, and I think there's a lot to talk about here. 70% of kids quit youth sports by age 13. That's a fact. And to me, that's a product of a lot of factors. Over specialization, like early specialization in youth sports, kind of unrealistic commitments to too much, too early, kind of this professionalization of youth sports that's going on. And parents are driving this issue, unfortunately, because they want this sports thing for their kids, but maybe the motivations behind it are aimed at, wanting to feel, parents feel a certain way when their kids are good at sports. We all know that. That's maybe one motivation. Another motivation is, let's get them into college. Maybe another motivation is, hey, I see all these pro athletes on TV. Wouldn't that be cool if my son was a pro athlete? So there's some motivations there from parents, which let's just say what they are. The issue is the parents didn't have, most parents didn't have very well-rounded sports experiences like we did, where we saw all different levels of it. We got to mature through it and see, the positives, the negatives, everything in between, kind of unpack it. So you have these parents that aren't really very skilled or qualified kind of driving the youth sports bus, being like, hey, you know, more is better. And, you know, it's causing mental health issues in kids, and that's why they're quitting. And I feel for both the parents and the kids in this situation. That's what I see in Newport Beach. It's very apparent. I feel for parents and kids in this situation, and I feel like there's a lot that we can do as former athletes to unpack this situation and be mentors in this space to help parents and youth athletes have a better experience. And I think we'll all agree youth sports is one of the, you know, sports in society is one of the most important things there is. It's what people live for. I mean, it's not only is it passion, it's like, you know, it's on the surface, there's physical, you know, stimulation, mental stimulation. You're playing a game, you're not thinking. There's all these benefits for it. But it's also people's, like, you know, lifeblood. It's their passion to play these sports. I know it was for us. And I think it's one of the most important parts of society. And I think I think the quality of it, unfortunately, has gone down in a ways, even though we're producing better athletes, the quality of the youth sports landscape is causing more mental health issues for kids on the way to producing all these great athletes that you see in the Olympics and everything else. And so, you know, when I'm raising my 4-year-old boys right now, and what I want for them, I want them to have a balance of high performance and mental health. And what I think that looks like is a little bit more variety in the types of sports you're playing, especially at a young age. I think it's some teaching and some resources for the kids and the parents to have a more beneficial experience. And I also think it's less games, less travel, especially at young ages. And I'd kind of like the intramural systems that I think a lot of us grew up. I don't know, you guys probably had different sports experiences, but growing up in Needham outside of Boston and born in 1985, so late 80s, early 90s, it was basically just like intramural town soccer type stuff. You play in the fall, you play in the spring, and you get the winter and the summer off and play a bunch. I played basketball, baseball, soccer, lacrosse, golf, you know, all these different things. And I think that makes you a more resilient, more well-rounded person. If you just have one sport and you're a 13-year-old kid, that's the only sport you know, and then all of a sudden you're not on the first team or you have a bad game, you know, it makes you fragile. It's like, okay, I can't, you know, and these kids, that's why they're quitting. They're fragile. And there's a ton of pressure put on them from the parents. So anyway, that's just kind of a preview of something that I'm working towards. That I know Ben is, and I think a lot of people should be focused on this thing because it has huge implications, you know, on society as well. And it's one of the main ways to reach children and help grow and develop healthy children.
There's a couple terms you touched on there. And, monomania, doing all of one thing, isn't, our brains aren't wired that way. It's not healthy, you know. And what happens as a result of that is this term I just posted about. It's called habituation, where the stimulus that you initially get from something starts to wear out over time. So we're seeing kids getting disengaged as well, and it's because they're doing this one thing over and over again. It's just not stimulating enough. Having variety in their life, being exposed to different games, different people, different humans, it's going to help that one sport that they're ultimately going to specialize in when the timing is appropriate. When the timing is appropriate, I'm going to underline that and exclamation point it. But doing that younger and younger, I mean, we're hindering their development cognitively as well. Like And Steve's exactly right. It's an adult driven problem, by adults who don't have realistic views on how pros get to where they're going historically. Like
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to a Seahawks game, and it's totally logical. I mean, you have a blue collar worker who spent his entire paycheck to have season tickets to the Hawks, and that's a lot of cost in his life, and he wants that. And like, man, if my kid did that, like, how great would that be? Boom, I'm gonna shove him do this. And I go on Instagram and I see all these kids training like that. Okay, I gotta do that. I gotta do this. I gotta do this. I gotta do this. And if the kid's soft, I'm gonna kick him in the ass, and I'm gonna keep him going. This and this and this. And I need a private coach. I need Ben. I need this and this. And it's like, whoa, now they're deep into it, money over their head, and the kid's not performing. Kid's not healthy. And that's one of many scenarios, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on the martial arts bandwagon soapbox for a second because I grew up wrestling, and that was not not my main sport, but it made me a better soccer player. I was a three sport letterman athlete in high school and played soccer in college. And I think the thing getting my kids into jujitsu at a young age, it's totally different than anything they do. It's nothing like basketball. It's nothing like soccer that they play. And it's really hard. You have to exert a tremendous amount of energy in a 45-minute jiu-jitsu practice. And it's wrestling. Like it's organized grab ass, but it's fun. It's like it totally changes the way that you use your brain. And for me, it's like I've fallen in love with it in my adult years. I'm officially retired from men's over 40 outdoor Division II soccer so that I can focus on jiu-jitsu because it's fun again. I'm in love with the sport again at 41 years old. And so, I mean, I wanted to throw it in there because I think it's important. Now, for other people, and especially for other athletes who are serious in their youth, it also might be art classes or the cello
Yeah.
that is like, oh God, I'm in love with this thing and it's fun and it's different and I'm not very good at it and I'm learning. And I just think that there's that kids can do that, youth athletes can do that, and also adults too.
They could be growing tomatoes.
They could be growing tomatoes and keeping bees.
Full circle.
Full
Awesome.
circle.
Oh, by the way, real
Dude,
quick, the full circle moment. Steve, did you know that Sean has an infrared red light cup on his testicles right now?
Perfect.
He's not wrong.
So, smell that thing.
Oh, that is sweet.
God.
We're gonna design an in-game one for James so you can put it in your cup.
What kind of petri dish is that?
Dude, this has been such a fascinating conversation, you guys. Steve, like, it's so cool to have you, and the fact that you have had so much success and that you're so passionate about what you do. I mean, I think anybody that's listening right now is wondering, like, what are you going to do, Steve? Like, how clear is the next? I'd like to. I don't know. If I'm listening to this, I'm like, so what is Steve going to actually be doing? Like, how clear is that?
I'll say it's getting clearer. It's getting clearer. You can see that there's several ideas there, all worthy ambitions. Yeah. All worthy ambitions. I think, I'd like to, do a lot of them. It's kind of figuring out the order and how to get the skills necessary. Like, I look at people who build businesses and get stuff done. And, I understood how to get things done as a football player. And I'm trying to understand, okay, what does it look like to get things done in this next phase? Because it's different. And there's different skills required. And I've picked up a few of them, but I still have a few more to pick up. And there's a few more people I probably need to meet on that journey. I'm just kind of open to everything, but it's crazy to watch it all kind of unfold.
It's a worthy journey.
Yeah. Appreciate it. I'm headed towards something, Sean.
Well, I have no doubt, and it's going to be of the utmost quality and authenticity, Steve. I've known you long enough. Back when we first met, when you were floating in float tanks. I know that whatever it is that you're going to do, it's going to be great. You're going to do well. And it's scary being an entrepreneur. It's
Yeah, it is.
frightening. It's frightening eating what you kill or eating what you plant, that's,
Yeah.
it's a spooky thing, but also
You talk about managing your thoughts. I mean, fuck, that's like, I'm always thinking about what's next. How do I make sure my kids are good? How do I make sure my wife's good? Our house isn't big enough. I need a new car. I need this, blah, blah, blah. It's just nonstop, which all equals more work, more work, more work. It's a tough one. So all this, the mental skill development doesn't stop with sports. It's got to be, I think, education that transcends sports so you can use it and continue it on, because the real life gets harder.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. That was awesome. I really enjoyed that. Learning from all you guys, and yeah, great group here.
Yeah, we got a lot more to talk about, buddy. That was awesome.
And scene.